Okay, we're going to do a little freeze drying technique here. Alright, so I've been saying for a few days that I'm going to try and get a freeze drying setup done for you folks, and here it is. We need a container that seals and will maintain a vacuum. In this case I chose an acrylic food saver container that you can buy pretty much anywhere. Part of the process for freeze drying requires you have a vacuum. Now the reason for this is something called sublimation. When you put foods in a vacuum and you freeze it, you've frozen the liquids that are inside the cells of whatever it is you're freezing, whatever food stuff you've chosen, and it's removing that moisture. It freezes it to ice, and sublimation is a process in a vacuum where it goes straight from ice to vapor. You have to have something in there to absorb the vapor, and in this case I'm going to be using a silica gel, and you can get this at hobby stores for drying flowers. There are some other things that you can use that are probably better, but this is all I can find around here right now, and it's the best I can do. To kit the vacuum on one of these, you can use either a ball valve, or what I'm using in this case is a wine preserver. Now this one's made by Houdini, I guess. This was $10 at a local department store, discount department store. I won't mention the name, but you can get these for $10. This canister was about 17, so there's 27 bucks. I spent a little money for some chrome, stainless drying racks. And I wanted something, these have got rather large gaps in here, and I wanted something to close down the gaps a little bit. So I took a paper plate holder, cut the bottom out of it, and affixed it to these with bread ties. Now you have to put a hole in this to be able to get it to seal, to be able to install your wine preserver. To do that, I drilled a hole in here, and I had a hard time finding a bit that was big enough to actually do this. In this name of expedience, I drilled the initial hole in the top of this, and then I took a rat tail file and filed the hole out big enough to actually fit the cork. And you don't want to leave any sharp edges on this, so you got to deburr the hole, and what that means is you just basically go around the edges of it and take the sharp edges off, because rubber, over time, a sharp edge in acrylic will cut through it and you'll lose your cork, your stopper. So we don't really need this. I've already made the hole. I cut the hole in the top of this thing. Yeah. So one of the things we got to do here is we got to get the cork in the hole. So I'm installing the cork in the hole, and this is a pretty tight fit, but it needs to be, because you got to keep your vacuum up. So now I've got the plug in there. All right, now one of the things that you'll want to do is put your desiccant on the bottom. This is, I guess, I don't know, it's a bag for potpourri or something, but it holds the silica pretty well. It will absorb the moisture, and I want to kind of spread that out and flatten it as much as possible, because my drying rack is not very thick. It doesn't give me a lot of space on the bottom. So I'm going to put my first drying rack in here, and bam, that's the first level right there. Now I could go ahead and put food there. I'm not going to, just because I don't want it that close to the silica personally. That's my choice. So I'm going to go ahead and put the second rack in here. Now what I did is I pre-cut some tomatoes. Now these tomatoes that I'm using for this, they're tomatoes that I bought for use, you know, for sandwiches, soups, and whatnot. And they got a little bit past the point. They're not rotten. They're not bad. They're just a little overripe. Well, these make really good ingredients for soups, just as a seasoning for tomato powder. So I'm going to freeze dry these, and then I'm going to crush them into powder, and I'll vacuum seal it, and I'll have an ingredient that's good for 20 years. When you do this, you want to cut them as thin as possible. Paper thin is what they call out, everywhere you read. You can look this stuff up on Google, folks. I mean, YouTube's got videos. There's all kinds of places you can get this stuff. But I'm going to lay my little slices of tomato out here and just kind of spread them around. And as you can see, that's thin. That's paper thin. Now, not all of them are that way. The thinner it is, the faster that it will dry out and be done. And you don't want any of this stuff to be touchy. It slows down the process. I'm not quite sure what the science behind that is, but it does. And so now we got this around here. Now, one of the things you'll want to do, you'll want to test your vacuum. You want to make sure that it holds a vacuum. Now, when you're freeze drying food, you put this in your freezer. Now, freeze drying works best at minus 40 degrees. I don't have a deep freeze here where I'm at right now, so I'm just going to have to make do with a regular freezer. It'll still work. It may not be quite as much quality as I would like, but it works and it still makes a very good product. And like I said, you vacuum seal these things that you make this way, and it's good for 20 years. You can do tomatoes, berries, fruits, vegetables, meats. You can put anything pretty much in a freeze dryer you want. You want to stay away from fatty things because fat doesn't really do too well in this. And I didn't use a whole lot here. As you can see, I can make quite a few trays to put in here, but I'm just doing this because this is our experiment and our demonstration. So now we'll want to close this up, and we're going to make our vacuum. Now, that's just a little bit, and got a little bit of a seal there, so I'm going to have to pump a lot more than that. Now, you can freeze dry food without putting the vacuum seal on it. It takes a lot longer and doesn't necessarily work so good all the time. So anyway, okay, got our seal, and I'll take this, I'll put it in the freezer. And now here's the thing about freeze drying. You freeze dry your food, and after it's been in there for a couple of days, you look at it and you go, well, is it ready? How do you tell when it's ready? Well, you open up your freeze dry container here, and you take one little piece out and you set it somewhere and see what happens. When it thaws out, if it turns black, it's not ready. Vacuum, reseal, reapply your vacuum, seal it up, put it back in the freezer. This can be done without a vacuum. Like I said, I have done it that way before. It takes a long time, and the problem that gives you is if you have anything odd in your freezer, like fish, then you'll have a fishy flavor in your foods. So if you seal them this way, that keeps that from happening. This process under a vacuum takes 3 days up to a week, depending on how thick you sliced your food that you're freeze drying. So anyway, that's how we make a freeze dry unit, and I'm Quade. Enjoy.